The adopted daughter was given to the billionaire as a joke, but he saw her as the love of his life. The ballroom fell silent. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors. 100 faces turned toward the young woman standing alone in the center of the room. And then came the laughter. Cruel. Cascading. The kind of laughter that strips a person down to nothing. Margaret Harrington's voice rang out above the mockery. Consider her a gift, Mr. Ashworth. A joke, really. Our adopted daughter. No inheritance. No connections. No value whatsoever. Perhaps she will amuse you. Vivian Monroe wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. 18 years of silent endurance crumbled in that single moment. She turned to flee. To escape this nightmare. To find somewhere dark and quiet where she could finally shatter in peace. But then a hand caught her wrist. Firm. Gentle. Unexpected. Wait. The voice was deep. Commanding. Yet somehow tender. Vivian looked up into storm-gray eyes and found something she had never seen before. Not pity. Not amusement. Recognition. The billionaire straightened his shoulders and faced the crowd. His next words would change everything. I accept. The laughter stopped. Margaret's smile faltered. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. I accept your gift, Damien Ashworth repeated. His gaze never left Vivian's face. If she is willing, I would be honored to have her as my wife. She was offered to a billionaire as a joke. A worthless gift meant to humiliate. But when he said those two words, the cruelty transformed into something no one expected. And Vivian Monroe's life would never be the same again. Have you ever felt invisible? Like no matter what you did, you would never be enough for the people who were supposed to love you? Have you ever stood in a room full of people and felt more alone than if you were standing in an empty field? Vivian Monroe knew that feeling intimately. She had lived with it for 18 years. Tonight was supposed to be just another evening of quiet invisibility. Another party where she would stand in corners and count the minutes until she could escape to her tiny room in the servants' quarters. But fate had other plans. And sometimes fate disguises its greatest gifts in the ugliest paper. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment telling me which city you are listening from. And make sure to hit that subscribe button because this story has twists you absolutely will not see coming. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Back to a 6-year-old girl standing in an orphanage hallway, watching a wealthy couple walk through the front doors. Vivian remembered that day with painful clarity. The Harringtons had arrived in a black car that gleamed like polished obsidian. Margaret wore a cream-colored dress and pearls. Her husband Richard followed behind, checking his watch every few minutes, as if even charity had a time limit. The orphanage director had practically vibrated with excitement. The Harringtons were one of the most prominent families in the city. Their interest in adoption was unprecedented. Miraculous, even. Little Vivian had watched from behind a doorway as Margaret surveyed the children like someone selecting produce at a market. That one, Margaret had said, pointing directly at Vivian. She has good bone structure. She will photograph well for the foundation galas. Vivian had not understood those words then. She had only understood that someone wanted her. After 6 years of waiting. After 6 years of watching other children leave with new families while she remained behind. Someone had finally chosen her. She had run forward, her heart bursting with hope. Will you be my real family? Margaret's smile had been beautiful and completely empty. We are giving you a roof over your head, child. Do not expect miracles. But Vivian had expected miracles. She was 6 years old. She still believed in them. It took less than a month for that belief to die. The Harrington mansion was massive. 32 rooms spread across 3 floors. Gardens that stretched for acres. A pool house larger than the entire orphanage where Vivian had spent her early childhood. But Vivian did not live in the main house. She was given a small room in the servants' quarters. A narrow bed. A single window. A dresser with 3 drawers she could never quite fill because she was never given enough belongings to fill them. She ate her meals in the kitchen with the staff. She attended a modest school across town, while the Harrington biological children were driven to elite private academies. She wore hand-me-downs and altered cast-offs while her adoptive siblings received new wardrobes every season. And she learned very quickly what she was: a tax benefit, a photo opportunity, a prop to be displayed at charity events where the Harringtons could showcase their generosity. "This is our little project," Margaret would say at dinner parties, her hand resting on Vivian's shoulder like a claim of ownership. "We saved her from the most dreadful circumstances." She was practically feral when we found her. Vivian learned to stand still during these introductions, to smile on command, to perform gratitude she did not feel for people who had never once made her feel loved. The other children, the real Harrington children, wanted nothing to do with her. They had been taught, whether explicitly or through observation, that Vivian was lesser, a charity case, someone to be tolerated rather than embraced. On her 7th birthday, Vivian had waited all day for someone to remember. She had seen the elaborate parties thrown for her adoptive siblings, the cakes, the presents, the genuine joy. When evening came and no one had said a word, she had approached Margaret in the sitting room. "Excuse me." Vivian's voice had trembled. "Is there going to be a party?" Margaret had looked up from her magazine with an expression of mild confusion. "A party? For what?" "It is my birthday." "Is it?" Margaret had returned her attention to the glossy pages. "Well, happy birthday. Now run along. The adults are busy." That was the moment Vivian stopped expecting anything. That was the moment she began building the walls that would protect her for the next 17 years. She became invisible by design. She learned to take up as little space as possible, to need nothing, to want nothing, to expect nothing, because expecting things led to disappointment. And Vivian had experienced enough disappointment to last several lifetimes. She threw herself into her studies. Education was the one thing the Harringtons could not take from her. She read voraciously. She excelled in every subject. She discovered a passion for art that became her secret refuge. In the margins of her notebooks, Vivian drew flowers, landscapes, faces of imaginary people who might have loved her in imaginary worlds. Her art was the one place where she could be free. The one place where she could create beauty in a life that offered her so little of it. By the time she was 24, Vivian had become a ghost in the Harrington household. She helped with the family events. She maintained her designated role as the charitable project. She counted the days until she could save enough money to finally leave. But leaving required resources, and the Harringtons had made certain she had none. They controlled everything: her access to money, her ability to work, her connections to the outside world. She was trapped in a gilded cage, and the bars were made of dependency and isolation. And then came the night of the winter gala, the night that would change everything. The Harrington estate had been transformed for the occasion. White flowers cascaded from every surface. Candles flickered in crystal holders. A string quartet played softly in the corner, while servers circulated with champagne and delicate appetizers. Vivian stood in her usual spot near the back wall, wearing a dress she had altered 3 times to make presentable. The original garment had been a cast-off from Margaret's closet, a decade old and hopelessly outdated. But Vivian had learned to work with what she had. She had taken it apart and rebuilt it, adding subtle changes that transformed it into something almost elegant. Almost, but not quite. There would always be something that marked her as different, as less than. As the charity case among the diamonds, she watched the guests arrive. The women in designer gowns, the men in tailored suits that cost more than she would earn in years. The easy confidence of people who had never questioned their place in the world. Vivian had learned to study these people, to read their expressions, to detect the lies they told each other with their smiles and air kisses. It was a survival skill, the ability to sense danger before it arrived. That skill was what made her notice Damien Ashworth. He arrived alone, which was unusual for these events where everyone traveled in packs. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfectly, but he wore it like armor rather than adornment. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his face carried the kind of weariness that suggested he had seen too much of the world's cruelty. But it was his eyes that caught Vivian's attention, storm gray and restless. They swept across the room with an expression she recognized intimately. Discomfort, displacement, the look of someone who did not belong and knew it. The whispers started immediately. That is Damien Ashworth. The Damien Ashworth. $12 billion. Can you imagine? They say he built it all from nothing. Started with absolutely nothing. He never comes to these things. What is he doing here? I heard he is looking for a wife. Every eligible woman in the city has been throwing herself at him. Vivian felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this stranger. He was being reduced to a number, just as she was reduced to a label. $12 billion. The charity case. Neither of them seen as human beings. She watched as Margaret Harrington made a beeline across the ballroom, her predatory smile firmly in place. Whatever was about to happen, it would not be good. Vivian tried to disappear further into the shadows. But fate had other plans. Vivian, darling. Margaret's voice cut across the room, sickeningly sweet and utterly false. Come here. There is someone you simply must meet. Every instinct screamed at Vivian to run. 18 years of experience had taught her that Margaret's invitations were never kind. They were summons to humiliation, carefully orchestrated moments designed to remind Vivian of her place. But refusing would only make things worse. It always made things worse. Vivian walked across the ballroom, acutely aware of every eye turning to follow her progress. The altered dress suddenly felt shabby. Her careful composure felt fragile. Every step brought her closer to whatever cruelty Margaret had planned. She stopped beside her adoptive mother and found herself face to face with Damien Ashworth. Up close, he was even more striking. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to take up more space than his physical form. His storm gray eyes met hers, and Vivian felt something shift in her chest. He looked at her like she was a person, not a project, not a prop, a person. This is Damien Ashworth, Margaret announced, her voice loud enough to carry to nearby guests. The Damien Ashworth, worth $12 billion at last count. Damien's expression flickered with something that looked like distaste. Vivian understood immediately. He hated being introduced that way. Hated being reduced to a number just as much as she hated being reduced to a label. Mr. Ashworth, Margaret continued, you mentioned earlier that you were looking for a wife. Someone simple. Someone without expectations. Vivian's blood ran cold. She knew that tone. She knew what was coming. Margaret gestured toward her with a flourish, as if presenting livestock at an auction. Well, here she is. Our adopted daughter. No inheritance. No connections. No value whatsoever. The words hit like physical blows. No value whatsoever. Said in front of 100 people. Said as if Vivian were not standing right there. Said with a smile that made it all so much worse. Consider her a gift, Mr. Ashworth. Margaret's laugh was light and cruel. A joke, really. But perhaps she will amuse you. The ballroom fell silent for one horrible moment. Then came the laughter. It started with a few scattered chuckles and grew into something louder. More vicious. The sound of wealthy people finding entertainment in someone else's humiliation. Vivian stood frozen. 18 years of practiced invisibility crumbled under the weight of public mockery. She could feel the tears burning behind her eyes, but she would not cry. She would not give Margaret that satisfaction. She turned to leave, to flee, to find somewhere private where she could finally fall apart. That was when a hand caught her wrist. Wait. The voice was commanding but gentle. Vivian looked up and found Damien Ashworth staring at her with an intensity that stole her breath. His eyes held no pity, no amusement. Something else entirely. Something that looked almost like recognition. like he was seeing himself in her, like he understood exactly what this moment felt like because he had lived through something similar. The laughter died. The room fell silent again, this time with confusion rather than cruelty. Damien released her wrist and turned to face Margaret. His expression had transformed into something cold and powerful. The face of a man who had built an empire from nothing. The face of a man who did not tolerate cruelty. "I accept," he said. Margaret blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I accept your gift." Damien's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "If this woman is willing, I would be honored to have her as my wife." The shock was absolute. 100 faces frozen in disbelief. Margaret's carefully constructed smile crumbling into genuine confusion. "Mr. Ashworth, surely you are not serious. She is nothing. She is nothing. She is just a joke." Damien's eyes never left Vivian's face. "I have never been more serious about anything in my life." He extended his hand toward her. A choice, an offer, an escape from everything she had endured for 18 years. Vivian's mind raced. This was insane. She did not know this man. She did not know his motivations or his intentions. He could be worse than the Harringtons. He could be using her for reasons she could not imagine. But when she looked into his storm-gray eyes, she saw something she had never seen from anyone in her entire life. Respect. He was not looking at her like a charity case. He was not looking at her like a victim to be pitied. He was looking at her like an equal, like someone worth choosing. Vivian placed her hand in his. The room erupted. Shocked gasps. Furious whispers. Margaret's face contorting with rage. But Damien simply tucked Vivian's hand into the crook of his arm and led her through the crowd, through the doors, away from 18 years of cruelty and into something completely unknown. The limousine was waiting outside, black and sleek and impossibly luxurious. The driver opened the door without a word, and Vivian found herself sliding onto leather seats that probably cost more than she would earn in a decade. Damien sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. The car pulled away from the Harrington estate, and the silence stretched between them. That was when Vivian finally let herself cry. The tears came without permission. 18 years of suppressed emotion breaking free in the privacy of this stranger's car. She cried for the little girl who had believed in miracles. She cried for every birthday that had gone unacknowledged. She cried for the years of invisibility and cruelty and quiet desperation. Damien did not try to comfort her. He did not offer platitudes or tissues or empty reassurances. He simply sat in respectful silence and let her feel whatever she needed to feel. When the tears finally subsided, Vivian wiped her face with trembling hands. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse. "Why would you do this?" Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the passing city lights. "Because I know what it feels like," he finally said. "To be someone's joke. To be reduced to a number or a label. To have people laugh at your existence as if your pain exists for their entertainment." Vivian shook her head. "You are a billionaire. People do not laugh at you. They did once." Damien turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Vulnerability. Raw and unguarded. "Before the money. Before any of this. I was a foster child from the wrong side of town. I spent my entire childhood being passed from home to home, never belonging anywhere, never being wanted." Vivian felt something shift in her chest. "You were in the system?" "Until I aged out at 18. Then I was completely on my own." Damien's voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes told a different story. "I built my empire from nothing because I swore I would never feel powerless again. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it meant to be seen as a person rather than a portfolio." Vivian studied him carefully. 18 years with the Harringtons had taught her to read people, to detect lies and manipulation, to recognize the difference between genuine emotion and calculated performance. She found no deception in his eyes, only a profound, aching loneliness that mirrored her own. "So what is this?" Vivian asked. "Charity? Pity? No. Damien's voice softened. This is recognition. I saw you standing there tonight, and I saw myself 20 years ago. Trapped. Humiliated. Desperate for someone to see past the label and recognize the person underneath. Vivian did not know how to respond. No one had ever seen her before. Not really. Not as a person with depth and complexity and worth. What exactly are you proposing? She finally asked. A partnership. Damien leaned forward slightly. A marriage of convenience, if you want to call it that. You would have your own space, your own life, your own freedom. No obligations beyond appearing together at necessary functions. He paused, meeting her eyes directly. Unless, of course, something more develops naturally. But I would never expect or demand that. Whatever happens between us happens because we both choose it. And in return? In return, you would never have to go back to people who treat you as worthless. You would have resources, opportunities, the chance to become whoever you want to be. Damien sat back. But Vivian, I need you to understand something. I am not doing this to save you. I am not a hero in this story. Then what are you? I am someone who saw something familiar in a crowded room and could not walk away from it. Damien's voice was quiet. For the first time in 15 years, I met someone at one of those wretched parties who made me feel less alone. That is all this is. Recognition. Connection. The possibility of something real in a world full of performances. Vivian's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this was too good to be true. Every experience reminded her that kindness always came with hidden costs. But something deeper whispered that maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally giving her a chance. Okay, she said. I will try. Damien nodded. No expectations. No pressure. Just one day at a time. The limousine carried them through the city streets, away from everything Vivian had ever known, towards something completely uncertain. Two strangers bound by shared wounds. Two broken souls recognizing themselves in each other. Two people taking a chance on something neither fully understood. And neither of them had any idea that this desperate arrangement would become the greatest love story either of them would ever know. This story is just getting started, and trust me, what happens next will surprise you. If you are enjoying this, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by how others treat them. Because Vivian Monroe was about to discover that sometimes the worst moment of your life leads to the best chapter. And Damien Ashworth was about to learn that $12 billion could not buy what he truly needed. But first, Vivian had to learn to trust again. And that would prove to be the hardest thing she had ever done. Damien's home occupied the top 3 floors of a building he owned in the city's most exclusive district. The elevator required a special key and opened directly into a foyer larger than the entire servants' quarters where Vivian had spent the last 18 years. She stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of luxury surrounding her. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering city below. Contemporary art hung on walls painted in warm, neutral tones. The furniture was elegant without being ostentatious, designed for comfort rather than mere display. "This is your home," Damien said, watching her reaction carefully. "Not a guest room. Not temporary quarters. Your home." Vivian did not know how to respond. The concept of having a home, a real home, felt as foreign as breathing underwater. Damien led her through the space, pointing out the kitchen, the living areas, the library filled with books that looked actually read rather than decoratively displayed. "And this," he said, stopping before a set of double doors, "is your wing." "My wing." Damien opened the doors to reveal a suite that took Vivian's breath away. A spacious bedroom with a bed larger than her previous entire room. A sitting area with comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace. A bathroom with a soaking tub and a separate shower that could fit 6 people. Closets that stretched on forever, completely empty and waiting to be filled. "This is too much," Vivian whispered. "It is not enough." Damien's voice was gentle. "But it is a start." He showed her how to use the various systems. The lighting, the temperature, the entertainment options. He gave her a card with his personal number and assured her he would always answer. "I have meetings tomorrow that will run late," he said as he prepared to leave her to settle in. "But the kitchen is fully stocked, and Mrs. Patterson, my housekeeper, will be here in the morning if you need anything." Vivian nodded, still feeling like she was trapped in a dream that might dissolve at any moment. Damien paused at the door. "Get some rest, Vivian. You are safe here. I promise." And then he was gone, and she was alone in more space than she had ever occupied in her entire life. Vivian did not sleep that night. She wandered through her new rooms, touching surfaces as if to confirm they were real. She stood at the window and watched the city lights until dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She kept waiting for the trap, for the monster to appear, for the cruelty that experience had taught her always lurked beneath kindness. But the trap never came. Days passed, then weeks. Damien maintained respectful distance, appearing for brief dinners when his schedule allowed, asking about her day with what seemed like genuine interest. He left notes on the kitchen counter. "Hope you slept well. Coffee is fresh. I will be in meetings until 6. He remembered that she mentioned missing access to books and arranged for a library card to the most prestigious private collection in the city. He noticed her lingering over an art magazine and hired a private tutor to help her explore her passion properly. Vivian confronted him about it one evening, finding him in his study surrounded by documents. "You did not have to do that," she said, standing in the doorway. Damien looked up, and she noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of running an empire that employed tens of thousands of people. Do what? The tutor, the art books, the supplies. She gestured vaguely. "All of it. Did you not want those things?" "That is not the point." Damien set down his pen. "Then what is the point, Vivian?" She struggled to articulate feelings she had never been allowed to express. "I do not understand why you are being kind to me. People are not kind without wanting something in return." Something flickered across Damien's face. Pain, perhaps, or recognition of a wound they shared. "Sit down, please." Vivian hesitated, then took the chair across from his desk. "When I was 11, Damien began, I spent 8 months with a foster family who seemed perfect. They bought me things. They smiled at me. They told me I was special." He paused, and Vivian saw the memory playing behind his eyes. "Then I discovered they were using my placement to commit insurance fraud. I was nothing but a signature on paperwork to them. When the investigation started, they dropped me back into the system without a backward glance." Vivian's chest tightened with recognition. The same betrayal. The same discovery that what felt like love was merely utility. "After that, I stopped believing in kindness," Damien continued. "I spent the next decade assuming everyone wanted something from me. And you know what? Most people did. But building walls to keep out pain also keeps out everything else. Connection, joy, love." He looked at her directly, his storm gray eyes stripped of all pretense. "I am not kind to you because I want something, Vivian. I am kind to you because I spent too many years being unkind to myself. I am kind to you because I refuse to perpetuate the cycle of cruelty that shaped both of our childhoods. I am kind to you because you deserve kindness, whether you believe that or not." Vivian felt tears threatening again. She had cried more in the past weeks than in the previous 18 years combined. "I do not know how to trust this," she admitted. "Then do not. Not yet." Damien's voice was impossibly gentle. "Trust takes time. I am not asking you to believe in me. I am asking you to let me prove myself. One day at a time. One small action at a time. Until the evidence becomes undeniable." One day at a time became weeks. Weeks became months. And slowly, gradually, Vivian began to see who Damien Ashworth truly was. She learned that he worked 18-hour days not out of greed, but out of responsibility. His company employed over 40,000 people whose livelihoods depended on his decisions. He took that responsibility seriously. She discovered, almost by accident, that he donated 60% of his personal income to foster care reform and education programs. All anonymously. All without fanfare or publicity. Why anonymous? She asked one evening over dinner. You could get tremendous public relations value from that kind of generosity. Damien shrugged. Because it is not about public relations. It is about helping kids who feel as hopeless as I once felt. The moment it becomes about recognition, it becomes about me instead of them. Vivian studied him across the table, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. She learned his quirks and vulnerabilities. The man who commanded boardrooms and intimidated executives could not cook to save his life. His attempts at breakfast became a running joke between them. Are those supposed to be eggs? Vivian asked one morning, staring at the blackened mass in the pan. They were eggs, Damien admitted. They have since become a cautionary tale about hubris. Vivian laughed, and Damien's face lit up at the sound. She realized it was the first time she had laughed in his presence. Perhaps the first time she had genuinely laughed in years. She discovered that he read poetry when he could not sleep. She found him one night at 3 a.m, sitting in the library with a worn volume of Neruda. Could not sleep? She asked, settling into the chair across from him. The numbers keep running through my head. Projections. Outcomes. Worst-case scenarios. He lifted the book. This helps quiet them. Read something to me. Damien looked surprised, then pleased. He flipped through the pages and began to read. His voice was different when reading poetry. Softer. More vulnerable. As if the words gave him permission to feel things he normally kept locked away. Vivian curled up in her chair and let his voice wash over her. And in that quiet moment, something shifted between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. She also discovered his fear of butterflies, which struck her as simultaneously absurd and endearing. They were walking through a botanical garden when a monarch landed on his shoulder. Damien froze completely, his face draining of color. Damien? Vivian tried not to laugh. It is just a butterfly. I know what it is. He remained absolutely still. I would appreciate if you would remove it. Vivian gently coaxed the butterfly onto her finger and watched it fly away. Care to explain? They are unpredictable. Damien straightened his jacket with as much dignity as he could muster. You never know where they are going to land. They are butterflies, not assassins. That is exactly what an assassin butterfly would want you to think. Vivian burst out laughing. Full, genuine laughter that echoed through the garden and drew smiles from passing visitors. Damien watched her laugh with an expression she could not quite read. Something warm, something wondering, something that made her heart beat faster. You should laugh more often, he said quietly. I have not had much to laugh about. Until recently. Their eyes met and held. The moment stretched. And Vivian realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that she was falling in love with her husband. It had happened slowly, then all at once. The late-night conversations where they traded pieces of their past. The comfortable silences that needed no filling. The way he remembered every small detail she mentioned. The way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. The way he said her name. Vivian. As if it were something precious. Something worth savoring. She found herself waiting for his return each evening. Listening for the sound of the elevator. Feeling her pulse quicken when he walked through the door. She noticed the way his hand brushed hers when they walked together. The way he leaned in when she spoke, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. The accidental touches that lingered a moment too long. And she noticed the way he looked at her. The hunger he tried to hide. The longing he thought she could not see. The way his breath caught when she entered a room. But Vivian was terrified. Loving someone meant being vulnerable. And vulnerability, in her experience, always led to devastation. Every time her heart opened a fraction, the memories rushed in. Margaret's cruelty. The endless reminders that she was worthless. The way hope had been weaponized against her throughout her childhood. If she let herself love Damien, and he turned out to be like everyone else, she would not survive it. She was certain of that. This time, the breaking would be complete. So she kept her distance, maintained the boundaries, reminded herself constantly that this was an arrangement, a partnership, nothing more. But late at night, alone in her beautiful room, Vivian allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to love without fear, to trust without reservation, to believe that someone could see her truly and choose to stay. Those imaginings felt more dangerous than any threat she had ever faced, because hope, Vivian had learned, was the cruelest weapon of all. The charity gala arrived 3 months into their arrangement, the first time they would appear together publicly as a married couple. Vivian spent hours preparing, acutely aware that every eye in the room would be evaluating her, judging her, looking for evidence that she was exactly what Margaret had claimed. A worthless charity case who had somehow conned a billionaire. She chose a midnight blue gown that she had helped design herself. Elegant, but not ostentatious. Sophisticated, but not trying too hard. Armor disguised as fashion. When she descended the stairs, Damien was waiting in the foyer. He turned at the sound of her heels on the marble, and his expression made her heart stutter. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Like he was seeing her for the first time and could not quite believe his luck. "You look," he started, then stopped. Shook his head. There are not adequate words. Vivian felt warmth bloom in her chest despite her best efforts to suppress it. "You clean up fairly well yourself." Damien smiled and offered his arm. "Shall we go convince the world we belong together?" The gala was held in one of the city's most prestigious venues, a historic building dripping with crystal and old money. The kind of place where generations of wealth gathered to remind themselves of their importance. Vivian felt the attention the moment they walked through the doors. Every head turned. Every conversation paused. 100 pairs of eyes assessed her, measured her, found her wanting. The whispers started almost immediately. Can you believe he actually married her? She must be exceptional in other ways. A knowing laugh. The Harringtons must be absolutely mortified. I heard she was literally given to him as a joke. Can you imagine the audacity? Vivian kept her spine straight and her expression serene. She had survived 18 years of cruelty. She would not let these people see her falter. But Damien heard the whispers too, and his response was immediate. He pulled her closer, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He guided her through the room with absolute confidence, introducing her to business associates and society figures with unmistakable pride. "This is my wife, Vivian." The emphasis on wife was subtle but unmistakable, a declaration of legitimacy that dared anyone to challenge it. Most people were polite, if not warm. They made small talk and offered congratulations and carefully avoided any mention of the circumstances surrounding their marriage. But not everyone possessed such restraint. A society matron named Mrs. Pemberton cornered them near the champagne fountain. She was old money personified, diamond earrings that could feed a small country, a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Ashworth." Mrs. Pemberton looked at Vivian with barely concealed disdain. "What an interesting choice you have made." She tilted her head. "Tell me, dear, how does it feel to go from servants' quarters to penthouse? It must be quite the adjustment." The insult was unmistakable. Vivian felt the old familiar cold spreading through her chest. But before she could respond, Damien spoke. "Mrs. Pemberton." His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were ice. "I understand your late husband made his fortune in pharmaceutical pricing, exploiting the sick for profit, if I recall correctly." His smile was razor-sharp. "Tell me, how does it feel to attend charity galas dressed in blood money?" Mrs. Pemberton's face went white. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away without another word. Vivian stared at Damien. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." His expression softened as he looked at her. "No one speaks to you that way. Not while I am standing beside you. You might make enemies. I have plenty of enemies. I would rather have them for the right reasons." Something cracked in Vivian's carefully constructed walls. Something warm and terrifying flooded through the gap. "Dance with me," Damien said, extending his hand. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic. Other couples swirled across the floor in practiced elegance. "I am not very good," Vivian admitted. "Dancing was not exactly part of my upbringing. Neither was mine. We will be terrible together." He led her onto the floor and pulled her into his arms. They were, in fact, not very good. But somehow it did not matter. What mattered was the warmth of his hand on her waist. The way he looked at her, as if no one else in the room existed. The way their bodies moved together despite their lack of skill. "You are holding your breath," Damien murmured. "I am afraid if I breathe, I will wake up." Vivian heard the truth escape before she could stop it. "I am afraid this is all a dream, and I will find myself back in that tiny room, still waiting for something that will never come." Damien pulled her slightly closer. "Then do not wake up. Stay here with me." Their eyes met. The noise of the gala faded. The watching crowds disappeared. There was only this moment. This man. This terrifying, exhilarating feeling of falling. Vivian almost said it. Almost let the words escape. Almost admitted what she had been fighting for months. But then she caught a glimpse of movement across the room. A familiar figure watching them with undisguised hatred. Margaret Harrington stood near the entrance, her eyes locked on Vivian with an intensity that promised violence. Not physical violence. Something worse. The kind of destruction that Margaret specialized in. "This is not over." Vivian could not hear the words, but she could read them on Margaret's lips. A promise. A threat. A declaration of war. The warmth she had been feeling turned to ice. "What is wrong?" Damien asked, sensing the change. "Nothing." Vivian forced a smile. "Just thought I saw someone I knew." But she could not shake the chill that had settled in her bones. Margaret Harrington was not finished. And whatever came next would test everything Vivian had begun to believe about her new life. The way Damien defended Vivian at that gala? That is real love. But Margaret Harrington is not done yet, and what she does next will test everything. Keep watching, and if this story is touching your heart, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment so far. Because the storm is coming, and Vivian is about to face the hardest choice of her life. 6 months into their arrangement, Vivian had finally begun to believe that happiness might be possible. She had transformed the art studio Damien built for her into a sanctuary of color and light. Canvases lined the walls, each one representing another step in her journey from survival to something that felt almost like thriving. She was working on a new piece that afternoon, a landscape that existed only in her imagination. Rolling hills touched by golden sunlight. A sky painted in shades of hope. The kind of place where a little girl might have grown up loved instead of merely tolerated. The brush moved across the canvas in confident strokes. Music played softly in the background. For the first time in her life, Vivian felt genuinely at peace. The sound of the elevator arriving early shattered that peace completely. Damien never came home before 7. His schedule was predictable to the minute, carved in stone by the demands of running a global enterprise. For him to arrive at 3 in the afternoon meant something was terribly wrong. Vivian set down her brush and walked toward the main living area. She found Damien standing by the windows, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Damien? What happened? Why are you home so early?" He turned, and Vivian felt her blood run cold. His face was ashen. His eyes held a devastation she had never seen before. In his hand, he clutched a newspaper, the pages crumpled from the force of his grip. "I am so sorry," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have protected you from this." "Protected me from what?" Damien crossed the room and handed her the newspaper. Vivian looked down at the headline and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Billionaire's bride revealed as worthless charity case." The shocking truth about Damien Ashworth's marriage of convenience. The words blurred as Vivian's eyes filled with tears. She forced herself to read on, each sentence landing like a physical blow. Margaret Harrington had given an exclusive interview. She had told them everything. The adoption framed as generous charity toward an ungrateful child. The years of supposed kindness repaid with manipulation and scheming. The party where Vivian had allegedly orchestrated her own humiliation to trap a vulnerable billionaire. According to Margaret, Vivian was a calculating gold digger who had spent years planning her escape from poverty. The marriage was not a rescue but a con. Damien Ashworth was not a hero but a victim. The article included quotes from anonymous sources within the Harrington household. Details about Vivian's childhood that were twisted into evidence of her manipulative nature. Photographs that made her look desperate and calculating rather than lonely and overlooked. But the worst part was the final paragraph. Sources close to the Ashworth Corporation report that the board of directors is deeply concerned about this revelation. Shareholders are questioning whether a man who could be so easily manipulated should be trusted with their investments. A vote of no confidence is reportedly being discussed. Vivian looked up from the newspaper. The board? Damien nodded, his jaw tight. They called an emergency meeting this morning. Stock prices dropped 8% before noon. Shareholders are demanding answers. Because of me. Because of lies. Damien's voice hardened. Margaret Harrington is a bitter, cruel woman who cannot stand seeing you happy. This has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with revenge. But the damage is done. Vivian felt the familiar cold spreading through her chest. The wall she had spent months lowering began to rise again. The instinct for self-protection that had kept her alive through 18 years of cruelty surged back to life. She knew what she had to do. She had always known this moment would come. Happiness was not meant for people like her. The universe had simply been waiting for the right moment to remind her of that fact. I should leave, she said. What? If I am gone, the story dies. Vivian forced her voice to remain steady. You can tell everyone it was all a misunderstanding. That you realized the marriage was a mistake and ended it. Your reputation will recover. Your company will stabilize. Everything will go back to normal. Damien stared at her as if she had suggested he cut off his own arm. No. The word was sharp. Absolute. Final. Damien, be reasonable. Vivian felt the tears threatening but refused to let them fall. Your company employs 40,000 people. Their livelihoods depend on your leadership. You cannot sacrifice all of that for me. I am not sacrificing anything. You are sacrificing everything. Vivian's voice cracked. I am not worth it. I have never been worth anything. Margaret was right about that much. I am nothing. I have nothing. I bring nothing to your life except complications and scandal. Damien crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands. His storm-gray eyes blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. Do not ever say that again. His voice trembled with barely contained emotion. Do you understand me? Do not ever let me hear those words from your lips again. But it is true. It is the furthest thing from truth. Damien's thumbs brushed the tears that had escaped despite her best efforts. Vivian, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Can you do that? She nodded, unable to speak. My company is not worth more than you. Nothing is worth more than you. I have spent my entire life building things that can be measured. Revenue. Assets. Market share. Numbers on spreadsheets that tell the world I matter. He paused, his eyes searching hers. But none of it means anything. I realized that the moment I saw you standing in that ballroom. All the money, all the success, all the power. It was empty. I was empty. Until you. Damien. Let me finish. He took a shaky breath. I know everything about you, Vivian. Not because I investigated you or hired people to dig into your past. Because I paid attention. Because every detail of your life matters to me. His voice softened. I know that you take your coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of cream. I know that you hum when you paint, usually songs you do not even realize you are humming. I know that you are most honest at 3 in the morning when the world is quiet and your defenses are down. I know that you cry during commercials about adopted pets finding homes. Vivian let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I know that you are afraid to love because everyone who should have loved you chose cruelty instead. I know that you expect me to disappoint you because everyone else has. I know that you are waiting for me to reveal the monster hiding beneath the surface. His grip on her face tightened slightly. But there is no monster, Vivian. There is only a man who spent 40 years building walls and discovered that a woman in an altered dress could bring them all crashing down in a single evening. The tears were flowing freely now. Vivian could not have stopped them if she tried. This partnership, Damien continued, this arrangement we made. It stopped being convenient for me the moment I realized I could not imagine my life without you in it. It stopped being practical the first time I heard you laugh. It stopped being sensible the night I read poetry to you at 3 a.m. and saw something in your eyes that looked like hope. He pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Vivian. Not because you are my wife on paper. Not because of any arrangement or agreement or practical consideration. I love you because you are the bravest, most resilient, most beautiful soul I have ever encountered. Damien, I love the way you see beauty in broken things. I love the way you fight to stay soft in a world that has given you every reason to become hard. I love the way you look at me like I might be worth believing in. His voice dropped to a whisper. And if I have to burn my empire to the ground to prove it, I will. Gladly. Without hesitation. Because a life without you would be no life at all. Vivian could not speak. Could not breathe. Could not process the enormity of what she was hearing. No one had ever loved her. Not her biological parents, whoever they were. Not the Harringtons, who had used her as a prop. Not anyone in her entire 24 years of existence. And now this man, this billionaire who could have anyone, was standing before her declaring that she was worth more than everything he had built. You barely know me, she finally managed. I know enough. Damien pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. I know that you are worth fighting for, and I intend to prove it to the world. How? Damien's expression shifted. The vulnerability remained, but something else emerged alongside it. Determination. The face of a man who had built an empire from nothing and knew exactly how to wage war. I am going to hold a press conference, he said, tomorrow morning, and I am going to tell them the truth. Vivian's eyes widened. What truth? All of it. Damien's voice was calm, steady, certain. About Margaret. About you. About me. About you. Everything, Vivian. The foster care. The years of struggling. The way I built my company from nothing. He paused. And the way I fell in love with the one person who saw me as a man rather than a bank account. Vivian shook her head. You do not have to do this. Your past is yours. You have the right to keep it private. I do. Damien took her hands. But I am choosing to share it. Because the world needs to understand that worth is not determined by where you come from. It is determined by who you become. And you, Vivian, have become the most important person in my life. The press conference was scheduled for 10 o'clock the following morning. News of it spread like wildfire. Every major outlet sent cameras. Every business reporter cleared their schedule. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how Damien Ashworth would respond to the scandal threatening to destroy him. Vivian watched from backstage, hidden behind a curtain that separated her from the hundreds of cameras and reporters filling the auditorium. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Damien had refused to let her leave, had refused to let her sacrifice herself, had refused to choose his empire over her. Now he was about to risk everything in front of the world. The room fell silent as Damien walked to the podium. He wore a simple dark suit. No notes. No prepared statements. Just a man facing the judgment of millions. Thank you for coming, he began. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. I know there are many questions about the article published yesterday. About my wife. About my judgment. About whether I am fit to lead the company I have spent my life building. He paused, letting the tension build. I am not here to defend myself against accusations. I am here to tell you a story. A story that begins 26 years before I made my first dollar. A story about a boy who was told repeatedly that he would never amount to anything. The room was absolutely silent. Cameras flashed like lightning, but no one spoke. 26 years ago, I was a foster child with no future. I bounced from home to home, never staying anywhere long enough to unpack my bag. I was told I was worthless. I was told I would end up in prison or dead or forgotten. I was told that children like me did not get happy endings. Damien's voice remained steady, but Vivian could see the emotion in his eyes. I believed them. For a long time, I believed every cruel word. I believed I was nothing, that I deserved nothing, that the world would be better off if I simply disappeared. He looked directly into the cameras. Then I grew up. I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college. I slept in my car for 2 years because I could not afford rent. I built a company from nothing because I swore I would never feel powerless again. And somewhere along the way, I forgot where I came from. I forgot what it felt like to be dismissed, to be discarded, to be seen as worthless. He paused again, and when he spoke, his voice carried a new intensity. Then I met Vivian. Backstage, Vivian pressed her hand to her heart. The woman I married was told the same things I was told. She was adopted by people who saw her as a tax deduction rather than a daughter. She was raised by people who treated her as disposable. She was offered to me at a party as a joke. A cruel, public joke designed to humiliate her in front of 100 strangers. Damien's jaw tightened. They called her worthless. They called her a charity case. They called her a punchline. His voice rose. They were wrong. They were spectacularly, unforgivably wrong. The cameras kept flashing. The reporters kept recording. But no one made a sound. My wife is the strongest person I have ever known. She survived 18 years of psychological abuse and emerged with her compassion intact. She trusted me when every experience had taught her that trust leads to betrayal. She loved me when she had every reason to believe that love was just another word for pain. Damien's voice cracked slightly, and he paused to compose himself. So yes, I married a woman the world considers worthless. I married a woman with no inheritance, no connections, no social standing. I married a woman who was given to me as a joke. He straightened his shoulders and stared directly into the cameras. And I would do it again. 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. I would choose her over every dollar I have ever made. I would choose her over every deal I have ever closed. I would choose her over this company, over my reputation, over everything the world uses to measure worth. The silence in the room was absolute. Because Vivian Monroe is worth more than every dollar I have ever earned. She is worth more than every company I have ever built. She is worth more than every success I have ever achieved. She is worth more than $12 billion. She is worth more than anything. Damien's voice hardened. To my shareholders, if my choice of wife concerns you, sell your stock. I will buy it back myself. To my board of directors, if you want my resignation, you will have it. But I will not apologize for loving someone the world tried to throw away. He paused one final time. Because that is exactly what someone should have done for me 26 years ago. Someone should have seen the worthless foster kid and recognized that worth is not determined by circumstance. Someone should have chosen me when the world said I was not worth choosing. No one did. So I built an empire instead. I accumulated wealth and power and success because I thought those things would finally make me worthy. His eyes glistened. But they did not. Nothing made me feel worthy until Vivian looked at me and saw a man instead of a bank account. Nothing made me feel valuable until she chose to trust me despite every reason not to. So that is my statement. That is my response to the accusations and the scandals and the stock prices. I am a foster kid who built an empire, and I am in love with a woman the world calls worthless. He turned and began walking away from the podium, then stopped and looked back at the cameras. And if that makes me unfit to lead, so be it. There are more important things than empires. He walked off the stage to absolute silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap. A single pair of hands. Then another. Then another. By the time Damien reached backstage, the auditorium was thundering with applause. Vivian was waiting for him, tears streaming down her face. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, while the applause continued to echo through the building. "I meant every word," he murmured into her hair. "I know." Vivian pulled back to look at him. "I know you did." The aftermath was extraordinary. Instead of destroying Damien's reputation, his speech went viral. Within hours, clips were circulating on every social media platform. Within days, it had been viewed over 50 million times. The response was overwhelming. Foster care advocates hailed him as a hero for speaking openly about his past. Business leaders praised his authenticity in an era of carefully curated public images. People who had never cared about corporate news shared the video with tearful comments about worth and love and second chances. The hashtag "worth more than money" trended for 3 consecutive days. The board of directors quietly withdrew their concerns. Stock prices not only recovered but climbed to record highs as investors rallied behind a leader who demonstrated such conviction. And Margaret Harrington found herself facing an unexpected consequence. The society that had enabled her cruelty for decades suddenly turned against her. The same people who had laughed at Vivian in the ballroom now whispered about Margaret at every gathering. Invitations stopped arriving. Phone calls went unanswered. The social standing she had spent a lifetime cultivating crumbled in a matter of weeks. Karma, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. Vivian learned about Margaret's downfall through others. She did not seek revenge. She did not gloat. She simply watched as the universe delivered justice without requiring her to lift a finger. The irony was almost poetic. Margaret had tried to destroy Vivian by exposing her past. Instead, she had elevated her. She had tried to humiliate the charity case. Instead, she had made her a symbol of resilience and worth. Sometimes the cruelest intentions produce the most beautiful outcomes. 1 week after the press conference, Vivian and Damien sat together in their living room, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and rose. The chaos had finally settled. The cameras had retreated. The world had moved on to other scandals, other stories, other dramas. But something had fundamentally changed between them. The arrangement was over. They both knew it. Whatever they had started as, whatever practical considerations had brought them together, those things no longer mattered. What remained was something far more powerful. "You could have lost everything," Vivian said softly, her hand intertwined with his. "I would have lost everything if I had lost you." Damien turned to look at her. "The empire means nothing without someone to share it with. The money means nothing without someone to build a life with. I spent 40 years accumulating things that cannot keep me warm at night." Vivian felt tears threatening again. She had cried more in the past week than in the previous decade. But these were different tears. Tears of healing rather than pain. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Anything." She took a deep breath. The words she was about to speak terrified her. They required a vulnerability she had never allowed herself. A risk she had spent her entire life avoiding. But Damien had stood before the world and declared his love for her. He had risked everything. He had chosen her over his empire, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. She owed him the same courage. "When you proposed this arrangement," she began, "I thought I was agreeing to a business deal. A way to escape the Harringtons. A chance to survive in a world that had never wanted me. I thought I would stay for a year, save some money, find my footing, and then quietly disappear." Damien nodded but did not interrupt. But somewhere along the way, survival stopped being enough. Vivian turned to face him fully. "I do not want to be your wife of convenience, Damien. I do not want an arrangement or a partnership or a practical solution. I do not want to be the woman you married because you recognized a fellow wounded soul. What do you want? I want to be your wife because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Simple, profound, terrifying. I want to build a real life with you, Vivian continued. A life with messy fights and inside jokes and Sunday mornings where we stay in bed too long. A life where we learn each other's worst habits and love each other anyway. A life where maybe, someday, we have children who will never know what it feels like to be unwanted. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. I want to grow old with you. I want to read poetry at 3 in the morning and laugh about your fear of butterflies and argue about whose turn it is to make coffee. I want all of it. The beautiful parts and the difficult parts and everything in between. Damien's eyes glistened. I love you, Vivian said. Not your money. Not your protection. Not what you can give me or do for me. Just you. The man who reads poetry when he cannot sleep. The man who is irrationally afraid of butterflies. The man who saw something worth saving in a girl the world threw away. She reached up and touched his face. I love you, Damien. For who you are, not what you have. For the wounded boy you were and the remarkable man you became. For the way you look at me like I matter. For the way you make me believe that maybe I do. Damien pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Not the careful, restrained kisses they had shared before. This was different. This was a kiss without walls, without protection, without fear. This was a kiss that said everything words could not. When they finally broke apart, breathless and tearful, Damien smiled. Will you marry me? Vivian laughed through her tears. We are already married. No, that was an arrangement. Damien took her hands. That was two broken people making a practical decision. That was survival. He looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. This is me asking you, Vivian Monroe Ashworth, to be my wife. My partner. My love. For real this time. Forever this time. Yes. Vivian did not hesitate. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her again, and this time there were no more walls between them. No more protection. No more fear. Just two people who had finally found home in each other. 1 year later, they renewed their vows in a ceremony that looked nothing like their original arrangement. No grand ballroom. No society guests. No spectacle designed to impress people who did not matter. Instead, they gathered in a small garden venue as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. A handful of genuine friends sat in simple wooden chairs. Flowers grew wild rather than arranged. Music played softly from a single acoustic guitar. Vivian wore a dress she had designed herself. Simple white silk that moved like water when she walked. No elaborate embellishments. No designer label. Just pure, elegant simplicity that reflected who she had become. When she walked toward Damien, she watched his face transform. The powerful businessman, the man who commanded boardrooms and intimidated rivals, stood at the altar with tears streaming down his cheeks. He did not try to hide them. He did not apologize for them. He simply let them fall as he watched the love of his life walk toward him. They had written new vows for this ceremony. Vows that honored their journey. Vows that acknowledged the darkness they had survived and the light they had found together. Damien spoke first. 1 year ago, you were given to me as a joke. A cruel punchline designed to humiliate a woman who deserved none of the cruelty she had endured. The people who offered you thought they were discarding something worthless. They thought they were proving their superiority by demonstrating how little you mattered. He took her hands, but they handed me the greatest treasure of my life. They gave me a gift beyond any measure. They offered me the woman who would teach me that worth has nothing to do with numbers on a balance sheet. His voice strengthened. Every cruel laugh, every cutting word, every moment of humiliation. I would live through all of it again to end up here, with you, forever. Because you, Vivian, are worth every struggle. You are worth every fight. You are worth everything I have and everything I am. He lifted her hand to his lips. I love you. Today, tomorrow. Every day for the rest of our lives. Vivian took a shaky breath before beginning her own vows. When I was 6 years old, I asked the people who adopted me if they would be my real family. They told me not to expect miracles. So I stopped expecting them. I stopped hoping for them. I built walls so high that I forgot what it felt like to want something I might never receive. She squeezed his hands. Then you caught my wrist in a crowded ballroom and said 2 words that changed everything. I accept. And in that moment, the walls began to crumble. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I would survive every painful year, every cold night, every moment of loneliness all over again, because all of it led me to you. Every tear I cried was a step on the path to this moment. Every wound I carried was preparing me to recognize a fellow survivor. She looked into his storm-gray eyes. You are my home, Damien. You are my heart. You are my love. And I choose you. Today, tomorrow, forever. When they kissed, the small gathering erupted in applause. But neither Vivian nor Damien noticed. They were too lost in each other, too overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had found. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Vivian realized something profound. The world had spent 24 years trying to convince her she was worthless. Her biological parents had abandoned her. Her adoptive family had used her as a prop. Society had labeled her disposable. But Damien had seen the truth from the very first moment. He had looked past the cruel joke and found something precious. He had chosen to love what others discarded. He had chosen to treasure what others mocked. And in doing so, he had taught her the most important lesson of all. Worth is not determined by circumstances. Worth is not measured by wealth or status or the opinions of those too blind to see clearly. Worth is inherent. Worth is unshakable. Worth exists in every human soul regardless of what the world tries to tell them. Vivian Monroe had spent 24 years believing she was a joke. She had internalized every cruel word. She had accepted the labels others assigned her. She had built walls to protect a heart she believed no one would ever want. Now she understood the truth. She was the punchline that became the love of a billionaire's life. She was the charity case who turned out to be priceless. She was the worthless girl who was worth more than $12 billion. Not because of anything she achieved. Not because of any transformation she underwent. Simply because she had always been worthy. She had just needed someone to help her see it. And that is the story of Vivian Monroe and Damien Ashworth. 2 wounded souls who found each other in a moment of cruelty and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the worst intentions. Sometimes the universe disguises destiny as disaster. And sometimes, the person the world considers worthless becomes the most valuable thing in someone's life. What did you think of Vivian and Damien's story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. Which moment touched your heart the most? Was it the ballroom scene where everything began? The press conference where Damien risked everything? Or the final vows where they chose each other forever? If this story reminded you that you are worth more than anyone has ever told you, share it with someone who needs to hear that message. We all know someone who has been made to feel worthless. Someone who has internalized the cruelty of others. Someone who needs to be reminded that their value was never determined by those who could not see it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because our next story is going to be even more powerful. We have so many more tales of love and resilience and transformation to share with you. And remember this as you go about your day. Sometimes the things we discard become someone else's treasure. Sometimes the cruelest jokes have the most beautiful endings. And sometimes, the person everyone underestimated turns out to be exactly what someone else was searching for all along. Your worth was never determined by those who could not see it. Somewhere out there, someone is waiting to treasure what others threw away. Until next time.